Okay, everybody. Finally made it. Let's go ahead and quiet that down. Sorry about that delay. Headset was dead. The batteries were dead. Of course, it has a lithium battery, which charges very quickly. All right, guys. Might want to buckle up tonight. We're going to talk about some global updates, but more important, some information, right? The basis of what's happening in the realm of war. Along those lines, we will walk. We're not going to tiptoe through the tulips. So you might want to buckle up. You guys do that? Also, remember, here at COT, we're not pro-Russian, pro-Ukrainian. We are pro-brethren, humanity, right? It comes first. Humans come first, right? Humanity. It comes first. Your royal children. Remember that. You might pick up some things tonight, and you'll be glad that you're royal children, not taking a side. Because I'm going to go over some things with you need to know about. We're going to talk about propaganda, things of that nature, because this propaganda is out of control and it's getting people hurt. So I'm going to give you guys a real story, real one. You don't have to believe it. It's happening, right? I'm going to give you the real story. We're going to discuss these things and a little bit more tonight. We also have another wave headed in our direction. I really was hoping this time this wave was different than the rest, that it would not follow the same track. This one is much more intense. I have a feeling it's going to strike the sun. And when it does that, due to the sun's volatility, we're going to have some auroras, probably all the way down to Brazil. Isn't that interesting? And you know what that means. You guys already know in COT that if people start seeing that, you know what that is. Those are high altitude collisions of high speed particles showing up as different colors, causing the sky to be brilliant and lots of different colors in the spectrum. Each compound in the atmosphere burns differently when it is struck, right? When its nuclei is struck. Oxygen, nitrogen, all these different elements, they burn a different color when they're struck, and that's why people see auroras in the first place. These are high-speed collisions in the upper atmosphere, right? The height or the which atmosphere those impacts take place in, they will alter the color a bit, but it's quite colorful, quite beautiful. But it also marks a huge change in what we're going to expect, right? We live in such a volatile time. Don't become fearful. Seek to understand your environment, right? Don't get scared and go running. You're not here to run away, right? God put you right in the middle of a bunch of serpents on purpose. He would not put a defenseless creature in the middle of a bunch of vipers if that creature did not have the ability to walk right through those vipers. Don't fear the vipers. Right? Don't do that. Don't fear war. Don't fear these things in the earth. But have a deep respect for the one who can destroy both the body and the soul. How about that? We have to have this discussion tonight. Hopefully you guys, you really understand and comprehend where we're going with this. We're going to be talking about the true state or the true nature without propaganda of Russia and the Ukraine. All right, some things you need to know. Some things you need to know. Okay, guys, now listen, I'm going to give you guys time to get ready. I know we took up a lot of time already. This talk will not take long tonight. It's going to be direct and to the point. I'm sure that you guys are going to have questions. I'm going to be standing by for some of those looking in the chat room, answering as much as I can while I'm talking about this subject. All right, if I don't get to your question, don't worry about it. Don't worry about that. Now, also, as you guys know, we are feverishly working at breakneck pace. Our data structure is, thank you, Lord, it is awesome. You guys know what we're looking for, so we have a slot for that. That word is already out there, right? So we need not talk about that, but we're going to introduce some of our data functionality to you guys to get you guys inside of a lot of COT's information, get you guys up to speed in quite a few things, okay? We want to get you guys up to speed. You guys need to know everything. You need to know that quick. I'm going to give you a hint There are 17 countries that are doing something right now. In fact, I take that back tonight. Just about every single NATO country, um, NATO member is doing this. They've already begun. They are taking every dime they have to make sure something is finished within a 2-month period. Everything is within a 2-month period. Everything is within a 2-month period. All right. So remember that. I'll be back. We'll discuss this and more right here at COT in about 3 minutes. Okay, everybody, I am here. And how many of you know about morale? Do you guys know about morale? First of all, let me explain something to you guys. Many of you, you comb through the internet, right? Most people do, and they read reports on the Ukraine. They also read reports on Russia. And when you have Ukrainian or pro-Ukrainian individuals writing about the war, you always hear how Russia is running out of everything, right? How they're being pushed back, right? That's what you hear, right? Now, I want you guys, right? I want you guys to participate in this by giving me some of your feedback to let me know what you guys are hearing, so that we can all get this word out. Everybody can at least, right, have a good idea of what's actually taking place. Because I'll tell you, some things are stretched and some things are totally eliminated, right? That's not going to help the Christian population any. Let's go ahead and face it. Yes, we do desire to depend upon the Spirit, but we are bombarded with information every single day, right? We are. And we go and hear people give their opinions, and so sometimes you don't really know what the situation is. I'm going to give you a from the ground report, not from somebody else's desk report. Okay. Now, I can't go into detail on that, obviously, but I want you guys to know what the facts are. Kind of like when Russia goes out and they start recruiting people or telling people, hey, you've got to serve, right, in the military. And a lot of people, they began to run away from Russia. That was real, right? It was real. A lot of people did that, but a lot of people did not. Did you know that? You hear about a lot of people leaving. I'm telling you right now, a lot of people were not leaving, not at all. In fact, a lot of people rallied around this call for Putin. Lots of people. Now, that's a fact. Most people there in certain impoverished towns and cities, okay, they couldn't afford it, so they were trying to go somewhere. Some people did. They tried to go somewhere. These are, and for the most part, these are people just like us. You have people in the USA, some are not as patriotic as others, correct? That's the way it is. But I want you guys to know that a lot of people did not go anywhere. So he could, in fact, muster about 135 million people. He could do that easily, right? He could do that. We're talking about qualified individuals, people who have served in the military under the age of 40. That's what we're talking about. Under the age of 40, right? Now we're not talking about over the age of 40, under the age of 40. Russia is huge, by the way. Do you guys know how big Russia is? And if you've ever seen, if you've dealt with the tactical information of how Russia is set up and where their bases are and everything else, you would understand that. To date, Russia has been highly reserved in who it sent to fight the Ukrainians. Most of the folks that went to go fight in Ukraine from Russia, they pulled from training. They did. They pulled from training. So you're not talking about the folks who are trained in special tactics, mechanized individuals. You're not talking about those folks. Believe me when I tell you, their bases are full. They're manning their positions. A lot of them want to go, but Putin says no. Do you know why? Because he knows exactly what's coming, and you may not. He knows what's coming. And so what he's been doing is putting uniforms on folks who are in the Middle East. He's been giving them uniforms, giving volunteers uniforms. They've been fighting over there, right? That's what's been happening. So it's not quite like people are printing it, or what pro-Ukrainian individuals would print. It's not quite like that, right? But again, if you know what morale is, This is why we have to stay in our respective positions concerning the Lord. Here's why. When it comes to morale, Zelensky cannot keep morale up, nor can he keep the hopes of his people up by accepting any type defeat. Right? The same thing happened. This was initiated in the Gulf War, but who is it that started this? I think it was Colonel. Well, anyway, let me not get into names. Anyway, the commanding general was advised, and he totally agreed with it. A general with the highest IQ on the planet, by the way, he told the media to get out. He put him out. He put him out of the Gulf War because we were effectively inhibited with the media on the ground wanting to know everything, right? War is not pretty. It's not pretty, right? And when you have war exposed to civilians, all they want is accountability without understanding what war is in the first place. So what you see now is you see the media um, is highly involved in this war. And so naturally, anything that you hear from the Ukraine is going to be utilized to motivate their fighters. You don't want your fighters to lose hope in the war, to lose hope in the tactics of those appointed over them, to lose hope in their president. And so what you're going to hear is those folks who rally behind or try to increase morale by saying, we're doing a good job, we're knocking them out, we just pushed them back. That raises morale. What usually happens is the media gets a hold of this, or some reporter gets a hold of this, not understanding, right, that they don't want their troops demoralized, but that they rally or galvanize their troops behind the ideology that they can do it, they can achieve their objective. People get a hold of this, and they start adding to what they've heard, right? If you were commanding some troops out there, you're not going to say, well, fellows, we're losing and losing badly. That's not what you're going to say, because everybody would put their heads down. No, you're going to say, hey, we're making strides. We're making our way. We're doing what we need to do. Let's keep doing it, right? It may cost us, but we're going to fight. And you have to have people fight for a noble and good cause. So you have to add all these in, right? And then you start putting out these statements, or the media covers this, that, and the other. Well, if you get a person from the outside who hears this, they're going to take it as, set in stone. They're going to misinterpret the message. They're going to take it a bit further. And before you know it, you're going to have a bunch of rhetoric out there. Nobody knows what's going on. They don't. We're just going to absolutely mess up a lot of people. Because if people think, just imagine this. Imagine if people thought the Ukraine was actually going to win. Well, first of all, they didn't even analyze the issue, right? They didn't. Why do I say that? Because Russia has factories, lots and lots and lots of factories that make artillery and make bullets and make missiles. And they mine their own minerals. They have all the metals. They have all the everything to make these things with. They're not going to run out. They can make that stuff for years to come. They're not going to run out, right? But in the media, you have heard what? That they're running out of artillery shells. That's almost laughable. They don't know the stockpiles of artillery and bullets and weapons that Russia has more weapons than anybody could ever guess. They have more bullets and artillery, and special artillery that would just blow your mind. They're not going to run out, right? This war would have to last at least, 50 more years for them to even get close to running out, because they can manufacture this stuff. They have factories, automated factories that kick out this stuff continuously. So that's hogwash. But again, when you're talking about morale, you're going to have people who are pro-Ukrainian that are going to try to keep their troops in good moral standing, right? Have to. Now, here's what you don't know, right? Now, I don't take sides. You guys have never heard me take sides with Putin or with the Ukraine. I don't like war. I don't. War is not actually the answer for me. It's been necessary throughout history for those who have been out of touch with the Most High in His ways, right? That's what men do. They fight. They believe they have to fight. They're going to fight. Even Jesus said there will be wars. Listen to me. He said there will be wars and rumors of war, right? Now you got to listen to that statement very carefully. He said, number one, there are going to be wars. That means people are going to fight. People are going to die. There will be wars. There will be rumors of war. So there's going to be talk of greater escalations. all the time. Right? We already know this. So, and also in the book of Jeremiah, he said wars, or in the book of Daniel, he said wars and desolations are determined until the end. Wars and desolations. You know what desolation is? Absolute destruction. Wars and desolations are determined until the end. That means they'll happen continuously until all of it ends. It's building up to a crescendo, right? You're witnessing history right now. You may not understand it, but you will. You will in time. Back to morale. Every president is responsible, that commander-in-chief is responsible for keeping his troops in good moral standing, right? That means motivated behind the mission. Or else, if those soldiers start becoming demoralized, they're going to run away from their positions, not be enthusiastic behind what they're doing, not believing in the cause, and then the Ukraine would absolutely 100% be defeated, right? So they have to keep them motivated. You have to understand that first. When people get a hold of these speeches, these documents, and everything else, they will misinterpret what has been said. They will. They'll always do that. You have some people who are politically motivated. No matter what happens, they're going to say that, Ukraine is doing a good job. You have certain people that are pro-Russian. No matter what the Ukraine does, they're going to say that, Putin is doing a good job. But you need to know the truth of the situation, not to pick a side, but to see what's happening, right? That's what tonight's for, so that you guys see what's happening. So getting beyond this rhetoric, getting beyond the motivations, getting beyond all the morale statements that are made for both sides, what has actually happened? Well, let's see. Do you guys know that barrage of precision missiles, munitions that was headed into the Ukraine? That a lot of people say, well, they hit a playground, they hit this, they hit that. Do you guys know what happened? They never discussed what actually happened. They didn't. But what you did hear was Zelensky saying, hey, we need air defense right away. And you did hear the U.S. say, yes, we're going to send air defense to you. Why would they ever say that? Right? Why? Because they didn't tell you what happened. All you heard was some munition hit a playground. You didn't even hear how many were launched, what targets were hit. So let me help you out. 80% of the Ukraine's air defense was taken out. 80% was taken out. 80% was taken out. So their air defense is almost down to, it's been minimized. It's been decimated big time. That was the purpose of that strike, right? They have jammers, right? They have jammers that will cause a missile to see a digital double of a target. That inbound missile, whatever it is, will then hone in on the double, and that could be anywhere, right? We do the same thing. If somebody launched, say, 10 missiles here to the U.S., we turn our jammers on. It sends blurs. They call them, it sends a blur to those missiles. Those missiles, by way of the software and hardware, start to lock into the blurs. That blur can be anything because it's made on the fly. And that blur could be your front door. That blur could be a swimming pool. That blur can be anywhere. There is no designated places. Once they start sending these ghost targets, this ghost target data to these inbound missiles, right? So that happens all the time. You're going to have casualties. But the point here is, while everybody was concentrating on the stuff Putin was not supposed to hit, they never discussed what he actually took out. They never discussed that. He took out critical infrastructure. For example, the Ukraine exports electricity. Do you guys know that? So they produce electricity. A lot of it they don't use, and so they sell it to Europe. They're not selling electricity anymore, right? They're not doing that because their ability to do that was taken out. Now, you just can't do that with a couple of missiles. You have to absolutely know what you're aiming for. And if you hit a power station, that's not going to do it. You have to know what you're doing. You have to hit something. I'm talking about you cannot miss the bullseye to actually critically wound somebody that way. Because you have to hit at least 50 or 60 different places to make that happen, right? Electricity has relay stations. You have to hit those relay stations and effectively knock those out so that no exportation can take place. That means 50 different targets were hit simultaneously, perfectly, to take that out. You can't do that if you're just shooting off missiles all over the place. That is precision guidance, right? That's what that is. Precision munitions. And when that means he wasn't just aiming for anything. And they did turn on their jammers, right? But they started losing their air defense capability. And when they lose stuff like that, guess what happens? The U.S. sends, $200 billion worth of equipment over there again and again. First of all, that's not sustainable. It is not. How much you guys know that? Here's a real picture. They're running out of things in the Ukraine, and the U.S. and NATO keep resupplying. It is not sustainable. There's no way the Ukraine can go against the Russian machine. The sheer count of machinery and everything else that's being held back from Ukraine is just outrageous. Putin is not really, he's not even engaging with them yet. I'm just telling you the facts. Because if you believe that Ukraine is a relatively small country, right? That they want their independence, they want their democracy, they have a problem because Russia says no, that's their land, right? So they have a dispute. They're solving this thing by war. I know a lot of people listen to the rhetoric. They listen to all the exchanges. They have built a picture in their mind of what it is. And in this day and age, you start building up a picture and it sounds plausible, people will believe a lie and keep running with it. Not having seen anything, they will just believe what sounds plausible, what they want to hear, and keep going. All right. So you got to kind of get beyond that. You got to get beyond that. I don't normally comment in areas unless I have eyes on, unless I can really verify some things. And for a while, I could not verify everything I needed verified to even discuss that subject. Well, I can now, but I couldn't before. I couldn't before because it was so many mixed signals, even of those who are on station in the U.S. interpreting what they're seeing by satellite, some of the information they're getting by embedded personnel and individuals. Right, all that stuff is a lot of propaganda flying all over the place. But you can see the facts, and the outcome of this last strike was made quite clear. Quite clear. Right? The money trail is also a very clear indication. It's not going so well. And I'm trying to get you prepared so that you don't, somehow become brokenhearted for something you shouldn't be brokenhearted for. If your heart's going to break, then let your heart break because man has gone to war. Right? But don't let your heart break because your side lost. Don't pick sides of men. Stay in the kingdom of the Lord. You're not here to pick the sides of men. You're here to intercede for man. You're here to intercede for the respective country you're in. And I'll tell you right now, that's much harder than taking a side because you'll have both sides hating you. That means you're going to have to withstand a double blow wherever you are, plus stand for righteousness, plus stand for all those qualities, all those principles Jesus set forth. And I'm telling you now, it is so easy to take a side. It is not easy to stand in the kingdom and take blows from both sides. To sit there and tell a person, I'm not jumping on your side. I'm not jumping on the other side. I'm standing on my convictions with the Lord. I'm not taking one of your sides, right? Because they will always recruit and try to get you to agree with one side or the other. God didn't put us here for that. He put us here for the sake of the gospel and righteousness. And in order to do that, you cannot take man's side. You have to take your Father's side. Right? You have to stand for those things of the kingdom. Second thing, winter is coming in Europe. They're having a bad problem already. Bad problem. It's bad already. Protests, bad. Everything is starting to break down in Europe. The snow is coming, right? The snow is coming. Russia is actually beginning to mount its troops. Of course, they had that small setback. They invested. I was looking at some of the books and some of the money that was invested in that pipeline. It's over $100 billion. That meant everything to Russia. I want you to keep that in your back pocket. That meant everything to Russia, right? Don't fall for the for the old two-step. Don't do that. That meant everything to Russia. That was a lifeline. It really was. That was a lifeline. So you better believe that Russia, they didn't do that. That would be like, destroying yourself. You're not going to do that, right? It'd be like you being in the dead of winter. Your neighborhood's in a fight, and you go out and cut the wires to your own electricity and blow up the pipe that feeds gas into your furnace. You're not going to do that because that would effectively kill everybody in your house. You're not going to cut off your income. You're not going to do that. So we have something else brewing here. If you understand that situation, and if it sounds fishy, it's because of this. If you think that the Ukraine, they're fighting Russia, right? You're wrong. To date, the Ukraine has manned NATO equipment to fight Russia. Now, let's get that straight first. Can we do that? They're doing this in plain sight, and you don't hear that talked about, do you? You don't hear that. You don't hear anybody put it that way, do you? The equipment they're using is what? It's American made. NATO made. It's coming from Europe, coming from France, coming from the USA, right? Coming from Japan. You don't hear any of that, do you? What is Ukraine doing? They're supplying men to run that equipment. Plus, you remember all the volunteers that went over to the Ukraine that wanted to fight. They wanted to fight. That's what they wanted to do, fight. You don't want to hear what some of those folks are saying because some of those folks they just wanted to fight, not necessarily for a cause. They just wanted to fight. They did. You know that by way of people dying from friendly fire. You don't hear about those cases either. Friendly fire is when one army accidentally destroys its own people. It's friendly fire. It happens. It's war, right? Lots of that is happening. My point is, a lot of those folks who volunteered just wanted to fight. I know that because there were a couple cases, there were a lot of cases where they were asking the people clarity about the situation. They had it all backward. They did. They had it backward. Oh, by the way, I want to tell you something else. I'm not going to hone in on that too long. Just don't want you guys buying into propaganda, but we're still going to stay in that vicinity. So much more you got to know, right? You guys have been hearing about nuclear threats. You have. And I don't believe you know just how close it is. It's almost like somebody wants nuclear war. I'm not talking about Russia. I don't think Russia wants a nuclear war. I know that somebody does, but I don't think Russia wants a nuclear war. I don't think so. Putin is a hardliner, right? He's not really afraid of things. He's not. Part of the KGB training, you have to suffer a lot, right? Kind of like Delta Force, Delta operators, Navy SEALs, Special Forces, certain extent classes with the Rangers. You have to suffer a little bit, all right? So special operations, they know about that suffering, right? KGB personnel, they have to suffer a lot, have bones broken, while they still maintain their discipline of secrecy. They do, under penalty of death in the training. They have to do this. That means if somebody holds your hand up, they ask you a question you don't answer, they'll break your pinky. Then they'll start breaking all your fingers. A lot of those KGB students ended up with broken fingers, but they passed. Your fingers will heal. They wanted to know, would you crack under pressure? If you graduate, you don't crack under pressure. And plus, in training, you have had multiple broken bones. Like the time when they drown them on purpose. They tell them to go into the water and put their head under the water. Only come up if you get tapped. They don't tap anybody. If you come up out of the water and nobody tapped you, you fail. And believe me, to fail, that select school is not what you want to do, right? That means Putin himself stayed under the water, obeying orders until he passed out. Do you know how hard it is to fight drowning? Right? Some people go through training in the U.S. and in special ops, right? And part of that training is to swim with your hands tied behind your back. The objective of that training is to get a person acquainted with the water so that they don't panic should something happen. In a lot of cases, I would say that 50% or 60% of the students there, they're going to experience drowning and passing out, not knowing what happened. They're going to be resuscitated, and it's okay. They live, they can survive it. Your body can recover quite quickly from that. It's the panic. They don't want you to panic. And anybody who can overcome panic that way, you're not going to intimidate them. You're just not going to do it. You're not going, and that's my point here. Putin is not going to be intimidated by a nuclear weapon, by a country starving to death, by people rebelling against them. And so half these stories out there are from people who don't understand that in depth KGB training, right? And also, just like in America, not many people understand what happens at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, Fort Polk, Louisiana. Not a lot of people understand what happens in South Carolina, right? They don't understand what happens with the training with soldiers there. They don't understand, right? They see movies about it and everything else. They know nothing about the training. They know very little details, which means there are a lot of people in the USA that have no idea of what SEALs go through, right? Of what Special Forces go through, of what Rangers go through, right? They don't know. Half the people don't even know what people who go airborne when they had air assault school was the same way. Jungle training was even worse. They don't understand what that is. They don't know what they go through, and they're right here in the U.S., though they have an opinion of what they think is happening. Same thing is happening in Russia. You have people over there right now, they have no idea what the KGB graduates have gone through. They have no idea, which means they don't know the capabilities and the restraint of their own president. But you better believe there are people in America who do. And let me tell you what's a consequence of that. America, NATO within itself. You know what they're doing, don't you? I'm going to tell you this, take a break, and I'll come back and cover it. You do realize there's a 2-month deadline to refurbish all underground bunkers in the Baltic states. You do realize that, right? You guys know that? You know they have diverted all of their money to this cause, to refurbish their underground bunkers in the Baltic states. Hope you know that. What does that mean? That means they're expecting something. That's what it means. They have a 2-month deadline. Now, it's so odd because you've never heard about a deadline ever. Not to have these underground bunkers refurbished. You've not read anything that was committed to paper that said that your military personnel, your civilians, had to be briefed in certain areas of nuclear fallout within that 2-month period. You've never heard that before. And that's just the Baltic states. All these countries who have money, you better believe they're preparing for it. You better believe it. I'm going to take a break and I'll be right back with you guys in just a few minutes right here at COT. Okay, everybody, I'm back and I wish you guys know something, right? Europe is in trouble. Europe is in trouble. They're in trouble. It's just, listen, I'm going to give you this is my opinion. Right? It's just my opinion. Only mine. Just mine. So remember that. It's just what I think, not what I know, just what I think. I think Europe is in trouble. Here's why. In Europe, you have a lot of protests, right? You guys understand the USA and other places. When you have a protest, you're not in agreement with the government, which means you're not supporting certain causes of the government, right? There's no large external threat big enough to cause you to focus directly towards your government. And so you have protests. And everything is not, things not going well in Europe. My heart goes out to them. They're in my prayers every single day, every single night. They really are. Because I understand, Europe is personally, I think Europe is a beautiful place. I do. I think it's a beautiful place. But they're going through a very tough time. They're degrading very quickly. And they're not quite behind their people. Or the people are not behind the government. In every single case, you have to look over large swaths of time, these large time spans. Every time people get this way and a war is right at their doorsteps, right? That's a very bad sign. Here's why. If they're protesting against their government. Their government is worried about an adversary right at their front door, right? We're talking about NATO's line, okay? NATO's line. And because of that, the people are having hardships. They're not agreeing with the government's plans. They're going to face bigger hardships when it gets really cold, because it's already getting cold. What could change people from being hostile to their own government, non-supportive, to a supportive role where the cold will no longer matter? Listen to me, because there's a chance, there's a good chance that relief efforts for Europe, which are planned, they're just not going to reach everybody. But they're not, right? But how do you get a person who is undergoing stresses from their lifestyle being interrupted? You have their government entrenched in an ideology and preparations for nuclear war, preparations for war, period, because they're very close to the front lines. How do you get the people to support what the government is doing so that the entire country can be galvanized to better defend that country? How do you do that? Well, as we know in the USA, right, people do not, if protests, when protests began here, everybody was all about the protests. They were all about nitpicking. They were all about this problem, that problem, this problem, that problem. And for a long time, nothing has happened in the U.S. But I've noticed something. There were protests even before Hurricane Ian. As soon as Ian happened, the protests declined. Do you know that? In fact, the entire conversation shifted for a bit, and that was just by a hurricane, right? So it takes a catastrophe of sorts to galvanize people, to get them to look above those minor differences, because you cause their immediate problems to become minor by having them face a bigger issue, right? It's what you do. I'm going to give you my thoughts, because they're not galvanized behind their government. And Germany and Europe, they need their people, the support of the people. They need the morale of the people to go up in order for them to survive as a whole. They're going to have to be galvanized by a large catastrophe, which means if for some reason something in Europe became a target, the people would be polarized behind governmental actions. It would go from rebellion against the government to calls of retribution. You see that quick. They're still going to have to vent their emotions. You know, you guys are Christians. You believe in Christ. When our emotions get, all out of the way, we understand what that is. Right? We understand that we can override our emotions through a rebuke, through prayer, right? Through all these different means that Jesus gave us. The average person can't do that. They don't have that instruction, so they have to have an outlet. A bunch of angry, disgruntled people, you just can't tell them, well, just feel that next week, right? Not this week, just feel it next week. You can't tell people that. What you have to do is you have to direct their emotional state in a direction, and a catastrophe by way of war will cause them to redirect all those negative emotions upon their adversary. Whoever attacked them and caused their problem to be worse, they will rally behind the cause of the government, and they'll call for retribution. They'll say, we need to get them back. We need to strike hard. The USA went through this during 9/11. Prior to 9/11, people were becoming not so complacent. They were beginning to complain. You guys remember the trillions of dollars that were missing in the USA. People were starting to question the validity of government. That's when the governmental support really began to break down during that time. People were saying all sorts of things about Bush Jr. You remember that? And then 9/11 hit, and all the rest of that went away. People were galvanized, and they said, some terrorists hit us. We need to hit them back, and everybody unified. Church attendance went straight through the roof, right? people began to act differently. People looked at their neighbor and they say, you know what, we're going to survive. The same two neighbors that were fighting the day before over the grass looked at each other and said, we're going to survive. We're going to have each other's back on this because the terrorists are out there. And so what I'm telling you is that if you're not covered by the blood of the Lamb, you have to have an enemy. Part of your life is to have an enemy. Your enemy becomes the outlet of your emotional state you have an inability to control. This is what happens when you're not washed by the blood of the Lamb. So that means you're going to have bloodthirsty tendencies when you're not washed by the blood of the Lamb, and you cannot rebuke your emotions. Your emotions will take over you because remember, to not be covered by the blood of the Lamb means you're led by your flesh. You walk by the flesh. So your flesh, the state of your emotions, the state of your mind, and everything else is going to lead the direction in which way you walk. Right? And they have to have an enemy. That's why they came up with, that's why in Rome they came up with the games where they used to, all those gladiators out there slaughtering each other. Why? Because they knew that people were not happy with their lives and they needed an outlet. So they had to have these games so that people could hate, so they could have that bloodthirsty appetite they had satisfied by seeing somebody else just obliterate somebody else. But it will only sustain them for a little while, and then the protests would begin in Rome again. This actually happened. And so the games were very well thought out to take care of that problem. We do it right now today. Why do you think NBC, CBS, and all these different stations have all these competitions? Competition has to be in our society of those not covered by the blood of the Lamb, or we would absolutely implode. People would have no outlet. Crime would triple. See, this happened before. Do you know that? It happened twice in the USA. When there's no entertainment, when people aren't killing each other, when there's no competition, right? When you can't, have a victory over somebody else, you start seeing through all the lies. You start saying, why are we doing all this? This is foolish. You start seeing the truth. That's what you start saying. And so what do? They have an outlet for your emotions. So when you go to a game, you can hate, you can rave, you can do all those things, and nobody cares because everybody else is doing it. And then what do? When they get all their emotions out, they say, oh, I had a good time. That's what they do. It is actually, they're exercising all this stuff of the flesh, which is why a person who's like that can't just shut off their flesh. They have anger issues and everything else. And they love competition. That's built into the flesh. Why? Because it's an outlet. When you relieve your emotional stress, you feel better. Believe me, they make lots of money off that. Pharmaceuticals, psychiatrists, and behavioral scientists, and all these guys, they make lots of money from that. Right? People pay for that. But what I'm saying is that in Germany, in Europe, they have no outlet. Everybody has to have an adversary unless you're washed by the blood of the Lamb. Right? Their adversary right now is government. When they get attacked twice, it won't be government anymore. Their adversary will be whoever the government blames and says, they attacked us. That will become the new enemy. People will galvanize behind that cause. They will suffer their conditions to have their revenge. You guys understand? That's the way the flesh works. All you have to do is think, how much would you go through to have somebody pay for something they did very bad against you? It's an amazing thing, that is, the flesh, because once you have a target, once your flesh has a target, right, you forget about your own small problems. In fact, you can't even sleep until your enemy is taken down, and that is vengeance in the flesh. It stays within the flesh. Of course, our Father said, vengeance is mine. I will repay, saith the Lord. We don't deal in that area as a Christian. But if you're not washed by the blood of the Lamb, you're going to have a vengeful heart, period. Because when you're washed by the blood of the Lamb, it takes a process of the Lord to get that vengeance out of you. Most people are eaten up by bitterness until the Lord does his process in their life, right? That's what he does. So Europe has to be galvanized behind that cause. France is going to be next. It will be. France is the only thing that sustains France right now is all those threats they used to have, and that's still fresh in people's minds. But it's wearing off. So protests will begin there too. Winter is coming. There are certain supply lines that have been cut off from those two. And so expect it. That's my opinion. Expect, in order for them to galvanize their people, they're going to have to endure an attack and have an enemy. They're going to have to redirect all that rage from the populace towards an enemy. They're going to have to do it. The USA has the same issue. We have a worse issue. I'll tell you why. Because each political side is calling up for blood of the other side, period. Now, I don't play that political game because I believe that Jesus is our solution. I believe that he appoints kings, right? I don't believe in complaints because God knows exactly what he's doing. I don't nitpick because I'm concerned about my neighbor. I'm not trying to outlive everybody. I'm trying to help people make it. That's my primary concern. That's why I have no complaints and all that kind of stuff. That's why I don't pick sides, right? Because the end of the matter is going to be in the hands of the Lord. No matter how much people fight, they're not going to get their way. They should see that by now. Right? The Lord's word is going to be fulfilled. No matter who sits as a president, the word of the Lord will always be fulfilled. And if he has to use a mule to do his work, he'll do it. So it doesn't matter how feeble a person is, how strong a person is, right? It matters what the Lord has decreed upon that land. And whatever God decrees is based in his saints in that land. You better believe if the believers of the USA don't stand up and start reverencing the Lord, worse things will come. It will come. God knows exactly what he's doing. We don't. God gave all of us exactly what we wanted, and we have worse problems, didn't he? He gave the liberals what they wanted, right? He gave conservatives what they wanted, and we still have problems. He does this over and over and over and over and over again. But what do the people keep saying? Well, if we just had our favorite person, everything would be all right. No, it won't. This has been happening for thousands upon thousands of years. It started with King Nebuchadnezzar, likely in some other kingdoms we don't even know about, and it's carried to this very day. Every time people call out for people, they want this leader, that leader. Egypt had a bad problem, right? They had a worse problem. They had some kings in there. They just knew for sure they were going to carry Egypt into the next millennium. Nope, they did not. Why? Because God had made his decrees. The Mayans, all of you know about the Mayans because of 2012. They were promised to rule and reign on the earth for 1,000 years, right? By Quetzalcoatl. And then all of a sudden, all of that was destroyed. So what I'm telling you now is that God's going to have his way. This is our Father's world. This is his real estate. He determines who stays in the land and who does not. He does that. We exist for his pleasure. He made us for his purpose, his pleasure, for whatever he thinks up. That's why we exist. We are his creation. That's why that statement's in the Bible, to remind us that we are his creation. I'm just so thankful he's a good father, not some crazed lunatic like we are down here on earth, right? We can know exactly who the Father is. He's the same yesterday, today, and forevermore. And to be washed by the blood, we know it does something in us because we're not dealing with the same circumstances and situations and the same fits of outrage and everything else that we were at the beginning. There's a process taking place within us, and it's causing humility and meekness and a host of other attributes God said we would have by the time he came back. He is working a good work in us, and it takes every element of the world to work that work. Now he's doing it collectively. Back to this Russian-Ukraine thing. So what do you see? You see a small country who borrows billions of dollars per week to fight a war, right? If you ask me, listen to me. If all the soldiers in the U.S. came from New York City, would it be a New York army? No, it would be an American army. It's just that the soldiers would be from New York, right? It will still be an American army, correct? We have that same case now. So what do we see? We see American equipment, let's say NATO equipment. We see NATO equipment out there. Who's manning or utilizing that equipment? The Ukrainians are. So who's actually fighting this war? Who is this war against? Not the Ukrainians. It's not against. See, if nobody had given the Ukrainians billions of dollars per week, every week, per week, right? If they didn't receive tons and tons of equipment all the time, lots of stuff has blown up. Russia has blown up quite a bit. You know how I know that? By the books of inventory people like to keep. There have been so many losses in the Ukraine by the Russians. It's ridiculous, and people don't discuss that. See, if Russia was not really blowing up anything, there would be no need for us to continue to send equipment over there like we are. We have trains running right now, right? We have ships going across the sea to send them equipment. Why? Because they are incurring lots of damage, but they're not reporting that damage. They're not telling you what's being destroyed. They're not telling you that. All you hear is how they push Russia back with minimal losses. That's what you hear. You don't hear anything else, do you? Poor Putin over there, he's the demon of the earth, correct? Demon of the earth. And guess what? If you don't know certain things, you would absolutely believe that. That's why I never choose sides. Our Father warned us, though, in this time that we live in. Be careful, because the world is going to call right wrong and wrong right. Good evil and evil good. You got to be careful, because if you believe rhetoric, right, you're going to start picking your favorite person. That's what you'll do. You'll start seeing these people as machines and not humans, right? You're just going to buy the stories. The only one that knows Putin very well is Putin. He knows what he has to deal with. He does. Me personally, I know the backstories of these guys. That was part of my job. So when you know the backstories, right, you see what they're going through. Always put myself in somebody else's shoes. For example, if somebody attacked the USA, and I was not the person I am today, if somebody attacked the USA, my mind would instantly snap towards somebody attacked the home of freedom in the world, right? They dare challenge democracy. They dare try to use their way of government in this country to enslave the people and not have us live free. They're trying to restrain us. That would be in my mind. And of course, I would retaliate, because a patriotic mind is one that desires for his country to continue. And that person is willing to do just about anything to preserve the way of that country. It's a patriot. And most people in the USA, they honor patriots, right? No matter if it's a twisted individual or not, they honor patriots. Why? Because at least they know that person will protect the ideologies and the decree and declarations by which that nation was founded and does stand. Me personally, I appreciate this house called America. God placed me in. I never complain about it. I don't. Because I could have been born anywhere else. So could you, right? You could have been born in much worse conditions, right? I don't forget those things. But I know one thing. If I weren't washed by the blood of the Lamb and somebody attacked America, I would just see that person as a threat against everybody in America. You see that? No matter what America was talking about, no matter the politics and all that, right? Because it basically, a soldier's life is to defend democracy, not to practice democracy. That's a soldier's life. That's what it was. It was that simple. You defend democracy. You're not here to practice it. You defend it. And you go out and you defend democracy, right? Right? But I'm washed by the blood of the Lamb. And I belong to a different kingdom, the kingdom of the living God. And now I understand. God put us each where we are on purpose. Wherever you are right now, you're supposed to be there. And if you're supposed to be there, no matter what the time is, you don't take up the causes of men, because you've already taken up the cause of the kingdom of the living God, which is the gospel of Jesus Christ. by the way, which is harder to carry into this world than Republican attributes or Democrat attributes, right? It's easier to be a Democrat in a Republican state or Republican in a Democratic state than to be a Christian in any of these states. That's for real. Why? Because if you're a real Christ-like person, you're not choosing the sides of men, but you uphold the values of the kingdom of God wherever you are. You don't compromise the gospel for any reason. And if you believe in that gospel, then you believe that all have an opportunity for repentance, as is given by the living God, not by men, right? So that means you trust and believe in God's timing, which means you have all mercy and all grace for somebody else. That means you count no one out. You're not pointing fingers. You don't go around teaching everybody, hey, well, let me tell you how to defend yourself. Well, you got to defend yourself. Well, push that person away and defend yourself. It's not what you teach. You become a soldier of the gospel. And you know what the Bible says about a soldier of the gospel? A soldier of the gospel is nothing more than a person who's committed to the words of Christ. I'm telling you right now, that's much harder, much more challenging than being a Democrat, Republican, Independent, a rainbow person, a tree person, whatever the case is. Whatever a person may be, it's much harder than any of those. Because in some cases, you stand against the ideologies of men. And you're for the pursuits of the Father in the earth out of his grace for mankind. That's much harder because you take a lot. And you truly do seek no revenge of the heart. That's when, if someone smacks you on the left cheek, you turn to him to the right also. If they ask for you to go with them 1 mile, you go with them 2. If they tell you to carry something on that run, you ask, hey, you want me to carry something else for you? You become humble, a servant of what? Of humanity. Why? Because the Lord said, what you have done to the least of these, you have also done unto me. But he also said, what you have not done for these, you have not done for me. So you do everything to everybody as you would do unto Christ. That's how you live your life. Right? That's how you live your life. Not one of you. Not even me. Right? If we truly believe that, we'll throw a person under the bus. Because the Lord said, do all things as you would do unto the Lord. Which one of you would tell the Lord, you're a loser? Would you do that? Nope. See how easy that scripture is. We don't want to think about that one though, right? Because it stops our communication of what? Of that release of negative emotions we have, because we have to have a target. Overcome that. If you carry the gospel, do not carry a target. You're here to intercede. That will snuff out your power. Back to the Ukraine and Russia. Now, these guys are engaged in a war, but I'm telling you right now, that war is minimal for Russia. Please hear me on this. Russia has invested no big thing in the war. I know people believe in something different, right? I'm not going into detail and tell you how, but I'm telling you right now, Russia has invested no big thing in this war. Why? Because Russia understands who's truly involved. Their mainline forces are reserved for NATO and the USA specifically. Do you guys know about deployments? Do you know the deployments that are underway from NATO? They're on the way. Do you guys know that? No? Do you guys know about Poland? Do you know in the Baltic states what the word is? You guys know what the word is? No? About NATO? Right? You don't know about NATO? Well, according to them, right? The USA and NATO was planning to launch a nuclear weapon at Russia, and this didn't stem from Russia. This started in Poland. Get ready to see sides change. Get ready to see sides change and people defect. Get ready to see a mess. Now, many people can claim right now there's not going to be any nuclear war or anything like that. Maybe not in this hour. But what happens November 8th? Do you guys know? You know what November 8th is? You guys know what that is, right? It's a pretty big day, right? Isn't that a big day? We go through it, lots of Novembers. That's when they actually pick who they pick, right? For the sake of midterms, for the sake of midterms, for the sake of elections, for the sake of getting votes and candidates that step into power. They start making up a lot of stuff and they have a lot of rhetoric that flies around. They hold back. They hold back, but they speak a lot to see what the pulse of the people is. It's the best time to actually, political science will teach you right before an election. It's the best way to extract what the people really want. You learn that political science right before an election, right? So you basically, you speak about things, but you hold off your major plans till after you have secured by law whatever seat you're going to have. But at that time, you commit everything to what you're going to do. In other words, you start something right before people have their opinion noted, right? Their choice noted. Then you go full force. You have to get their opinion first. You have to secure that first. Then you go full force. You guys hear me? That's when you commit everything. Because if a country were to give another country $1 billion a week for war, right? How much more are they really willing to give? We're talking about $1 billion plus equipment, plus other things, plus certain breaks, right? As we're talking about a lot of money. If they're willing to do this, then guess what they're doing? They're upholding that place. So in essence, I'll tell you right now that Russia is not fighting the Ukraine. Russia is engaged with NATO. NATO is telling all of its people, get ready for nuclear war. Now, on public channels, they may have certain folks who will deny it, but those folks are very specific folks who will sit there and say, well, I'm not leaning towards it. If you notice, they're being very careful. Officials are being very careful, right? They're being very careful because I'll tell you right now, somebody wants a nuclear war. May need it. Why would they want a nuclear war? Well, let me answer that question. Well, I'll tell you what, let me take a break and then I'll come back and answer that question. It's the same principle that applies to Europe. The people are protesting, right? The people are dissatisfied with the government. The people are complaining. The people are questioning laws of the land and everything else. The people are starting to look at the ideology that's at the root of that nation. And when they can't allow that to happen, can they? They can't allow, right, that word to get out, because we live in the days of social media where if any influential person gets out there and they start saying something very negative about the place they're in, but they say it in a way with, the charisma they have and the context they have where people start to believe it. People will believe anything these days. All you have to do is word it just the right way and people will believe it. And they know that. How do you stop that person? How do you stop any one of the 300 million people that live in a country to not take that route, to speak that out on social media? You galvanize them. That means USA has to be galvanized because we're ripped apart. Hope you're listening on this part coming up. Because in order to galvanize the USA, it's going to have to be something far more than 9/11. Much more than Hurricane Ian. It's going to have, if 1,000 people lost their lives, that won't be enough. That won't be enough. Our attention span is very short these days. No, it's going to take something quite large to cause people to stop fighting the system and put their trust back into the system and begin to work with the system again, right? It's going to take something of magnitude for that to take place. And do you really think that the USA can continue the way it is? We are ripped apart at the seams. They're even starting to question judges. And I'll tell you something. When our institution of law is questioned, when that is questioned in a nation, there is no nation. Hope you guys understand that. If you cannot trust the laws you obey or enforce, there is no nation without laws. You guys do understand this. And right now, not trusting the government is one thing, but when you no longer have confidence in the legal system, you're looking at an absolute breakdown. And I'm telling you right now, no country in the right mind would ever suffer that, because we have examples in the world where people do not trust the law, and the state of that nation is in a very poor state. So I hope you guys realize this. Hope you guys understand. People are waking up. They're starting to see. They're saying, wait a minute. This law can't be right. This can't be. What are you guys doing? You shouldn't do that. That's what people are doing. Right? They're not dumb enough. It's almost like they have to keep the populace at a dodo level, at a certain dodo level, to keep them believing in it, that everything is okay. But people are waking up. They're starting to see things they didn't see before. And people are unzipping, right? Their eyes are being opened. They're starting to say, no, I can't accept that. I won't accept that. I can't accept that. They're doing this with law. They're starting to look at laws. What truly has happened is, due to the internet, right? We have an international community. We have those who are part of the governments of the world, and we have those who live under the rule of governments in the world. And the people who live under the rule of governments through the internet and through television have seen other governments defraud their own people. When you see a government that you have respect for in your own country, that you see in this strange way where you respect government, you say, well, that's a complex institution. I'm not even going to touch that, right? That's the way you think. But when you see somebody else's government fall apart, those people are just like you start looking at your own government. Well, I wonder if they're going to do the same thing. And then when you start having these similar happenings, you start saying, wait a minute, maybe my government is just as corrupt as that government. Now you have a problem, a big problem. When people start comparing, it's just like you and your homes, right? Not one of you would have a complaint if you were blind. See, if you were blind, you couldn't even see what your neighbor had, right? You couldn't see what they looked like. Not one of you would ever go outside. If you were blind, if everybody on earth was blind, nobody would complain about how much stuff somebody else had, because you wouldn't be able to see it. You wouldn't complain about if you're big or small, because you wouldn't be able to compare yourself with nothing else. You wouldn't. We complain because we look at somebody else and we see what they have, and then we look at ourselves saying, I don't have it. Why don't I have it? And then we come up with this term, I deserve better. Isn't that what we say? I deserve. Let me tell you what God said we deserve. We deserve death. That's what our Father said. But what's the difference? He loves us. We don't deserve life. We deserve death, because God is righteous. And we are not righteous lest we operate in Christ. So we truly do deserve death. But he loves us, and he granted us life. Right? That's what he did. He granted us life. Do you guys see that? That's kind of important to see that. Because if you're walking around saying, I deserve the best, no, you don't. You really don't. Because that's a direct statement that denies that you're a sinner in the first place. Think about it. When you start saying what you deserve, you become pious in your mind, high-minded. You start looking down on others. You turn into a person you shouldn't be. There's no humility
in that statement. None. But when you understand that you deserve death, you're very thankful for each day of life. Thus, your life changes. It does. Big time. It changes. All right, folks, listen, I'm going to be right back and cover some more on this. And I'm going to get some questions. I know you guys have questions. I'm going to get some questions from you guys. But tonight, I want you guys to understand the true situation here. And if you have questions about the situation, just state those questions. Okay, let's go ahead and hammer some things out before I get off air. I'll be right back in just a few minutes right here at COT. Which button? That button. Okay, everybody, I'm back. Let me stop my own personal rhetoric. Oh, one last thing. God bless Israel. You guys do know that Turkey. More conversations today, Turkey and Russia. You know what that means, don't you? More conversations between Erdogan and Putin. That's a show of loyalty. It's not good for Israel. You guys do understand that, because Russia has a port in that disputed, well, it's going to be a disputed territory, which puts Israel in a very dangerous position. And I'm telling you now, we've not witnessed this much, these many happenings like this in a long time, because we have the entirety of, Switzerland, France, and Austria, and Germany, and all these different places, UK, EU, and my goodness, we have a situation forming. I'm going to read something to you guys. Before I answer your questions, I'm going to read something. Very important. I find this one to be highly important. Comes out of Revelation, of course. I'm going to read this to you, though. I want you guys to see something. If you guys would. Let me go back here. You ready? Revelation 16, verse 13. This is what John saw. And I saw 3 unclean spirits like frogs come out of the mouth of the dragon, out of the mouth of the beast, out of the mouth of the false prophet. Now let's establish something in verse 13. These 3 unclean spirits, they look like frogs, of course, but where do they come from? Out of the mouth of the dragon, out of the mouth of the beast, and out of the mouth of the false prophet. The beast constitutes nations. The false prophet, also known as the second beast in Revelation, was speaking the same thing as the dragon, and the beast was speaking the same thing as the other ones. So these 3 unclean spirits, in a coordinated effort, were working towards something this entire time, hidden inside, or let's just say working inside of the draconian or dragon system. There are 4 dragons, by the way, but the dragon, Satan, he's one of them, the beast, and the false prophet. But what were they doing? It says, for they are spirits of devils. So these 3 unclean spirits are spirits of devils that do what? They work miracles which go forth unto the kings of the earth and of the whole world to gather them to the battle of the great day of God Almighty. So these 3 unclean spirits are coordinating. Now, this word, working miracles, what does that mean? Doing the unseemingly, doing everything they can do, giving any reason, any premise, right, to draw people down to battle, to the battle. They have been working all this time to create tons of problems, scenarios, right? Causes for war, causes for sedition out of some, causes for like these election fights that we often see. These are spawned not by righteousness, but by unrighteousness, by these devils. These devils have gone forth unto the kings of the earth. And it says not just to the kings of the earth, but of the whole world, of anybody they may work in, to manipulate, to influence, to draw, to have them have this mindset to do exactly what they want them to do. These things you see in the world happening right now are likely, by the word of God, a direct result of what these three unclean spirits are doing. The conversations, the rhetoric, all this unrighteousness is being worked in the earth, the product of these three unclean spirits. War, these disagreements, these land grabs, all a product of these three unclean spirits. You know, when darkness works a miracle, they do what we thought darkness could not do. Right? One miracle is that Satan works for such a long time that at first it seems impossible for him to maneuver a person, to get them to do what they do. But over time, over 500, 1,000 years, they do exactly what he wants them to do. There was a time when people likely would have thought it impossible that abortions would be legal. There would be a time when people would have thought it impossible for marriage not to be spoken of. There was a time when people thought it would be impossible for some of the laws that we have now to be laws. They would have said, no way. That's never going to happen. Just as sure, somebody told me one time when I saw Obama, and I said, that guy's going to be president. It's just a strong, intense knowing. They said, not in your lifetime. We couldn't believe it. Just like we can't believe certain people right now are saying, nobody's going to launch a nuclear weapon. That's what they're saying to themselves. I'm not saying that. I shared something with Angela a long time ago. And I told Angela, I said, listen, one morning at about 7 or 8 in the morning, Central Time, people are going to go into restaurants before they even open just to watch their televisions, just to use their sci-fi. In this one specific place where it does not snow, it didn't snow so much at that time, but it snows there every winter now. I said I went into a McDonald's. I was telling her I went into a McDonald's and everybody was looking on their devices and at the screen, and no one was saying a word. Nobody was saying a word. I mean, not one soul was speaking. And then I heard a comment, and somebody said, I can't believe they had terror. It looked like absolute defeat in their faces. That's what it looked like. Absolute defeat. And people were saying, I can't believe it. And people were nervous, frightened, scared out of their minds. It was snowing in Iowa that day, in a very specific place, and people couldn't believe what took place. I told Angela this a long time ago, but this is something I saw in 1994, and I never understood it. To a degree I did, but I never saw what happened on that television screen. Never looked at the screen, but I did see the people. I could see hopelessness in their faces. I could see nervousness. I could see this disbelief in their faces. They couldn't believe it. They could not believe what they were saying. As I left the McDonald's, or kind of backed out the McDonald's, I could see everybody was glued to their devices. Nobody was talking. It's like nobody was talking. They were just stuck looking at their screens like, I cannot believe this has happened. Now, mind you, I saw this in 1994. And prior to that, 23 other times. Nobody could believe it was happening, but it happened. Whatever this event was so devastating because people were so confident in what they believed in at that time. It's kind of like today. People believe something is not going to take place. You're not going to convince them otherwise. And when it takes place, it turns their whole world upside down. See, when you believe in your own resolve, right, and it does not work out, first of all, that means we believed in a lie, not the truth. What has happened in your life is the truth of your life. What you thought was going to happen was the lie you believed in. Time we face that fact. So that we were not operating by imagination, but by the Word of God. They are two different things. We can have opinions and speculations and thoughts as to what we think is about to take place or what we imagine may take place. What takes place is going to be the truth of that day. And if it's not aligned with what we thought was going to happen, that means we were believing in a lie. And I'm saying this to let you know something. Over many days of our lives, we have believed in lies, and we didn't have to. Not somebody else's lies. We have believed in our own lies. There's no need to look outside into somebody else. When you thought something was going to work out and it didn't, you were believing in a lie. Because the reality is the situation did not work out. Right? If you can identify this, you're not going to believe in lies too much anymore. And the source of that lie was our own minds. We trying to create a future for ourselves, or seeing things based upon what we have been exposed to visually without any spiritual guidance. Basically, walking in our own direction, which is not following God, right? People were so taken back and distraught, it crushed them. And something else took place that disheartened them. It was almost like they saw an example of something nobody ever thought they would see. I don't know what the event was. I don't know what it was, but they couldn't believe it took place. And because they couldn't believe it took place, it made them nervous, very nervous. We're talking about all of the USA was locked into looking at something that they couldn't believe took place. It was almost like the USA stopped. Everybody took notice of it. Now, when 9/11 happened, I often thought about 9/11. I did. But there was a problem. 9/11 happened at the wrong time. There was no snow in this specific place during that time. There was no snow. So that couldn't have been it. That was disqualified. I wrote a long time ago, if pieces of a dream come true, right, then those are pieces of a dream. I have to rely upon the whole thing coming true, not just a piece. Satan has, he gets people like that. If God shows you something, the whole thing must happen, or you didn't get the truth, right? If a piece of something happens in a dream, how can that be the truth? And God is very specific, as I've learned when he gives dreams. And if everything must take place just as he gave it, or it is not fulfilled as to what he gave you. And he gave it to you, not so you can prosper from it, right? Normally he allows me to see things because of my own heart. It actually disturbs me when people die in needless combat, when people engage in rhetorical wars and there are casualties, when people do dumb things and start attacking their neighbor. See, that still bothers me. Violence, I can't stand violence. I can't. I can't take it, right? I can't take it. And so the Lord will prepare me. No situation, I thank God for this, but I'm not surprised by anything. Not because I don't know it, not because I expect anything to happen, but the Lord has walked me through some scenarios, right? Through death, right? He showed me death. He showed me people who wouldn't make it. He did. He most certainly did. Because you don't want to see people die. You're not some heartless individual. So the Lord will prepare you too. But I want you to know these 3 unclean spirits are working. They're working night and day, probably, continuously. And all of what you see happening in the world is beginning to escalate. And all these nations who are starting to engage in this war, these ideas that they have, where are they coming from? Where are these ideas coming from? Right? Where are they coming from? People are talking about the Ukrainian and Russian war, right? Russia wanted those places back, right? He did. He wanted them back, right? What got into his mind? What got into Zelensky's mind? What got into NATO's mind? Because right now it's a NATO war. It really is a NATO war. Okay? There are certain policies that were passed today that almost, when people find out about these policies, they're going to say there's no way we're not going to have a major war escalation very soon. This war could easily spiral out of control within the next 72 hours to a week. It really could. There's something happening again with the food situation in the USA. It is. A lot of money is being shifted in certain areas because they're about to turn certain devices on. Only the Lord knows what that's going to cause. That will be an announcement to the world. So will certain breakthroughs while all this is happening. One thing after another that does what for you? What is it doing? I want you guys to see something. With all this talk of war, I want you to know the true situation so that you're not a product of propaganda, right? You don't want to have everything hinged on propaganda, but that you have some sort of situational awareness beyond what people are presenting to you, right? What's going to be gained out of this war? I'll tell you right now, it's gone too far. Putin is not going to give up. Zelensky is not going to give up. There's going to be no concession. Turkey's involved. You know what Turkey is saying? Turkey's saying, well, maybe the Ukraine shouldn't have those areas. Do you know that? Do you guys know that? That's what he's saying. This is like the 5th time this guy has said that. Maybe they shouldn't have those areas. So what is he doing? He's picking sides, making Israel twice as nervous. Because alliances are changing. This allegiance people have is for chaos itself. But if you're listening to the rhetoric, you're going to miss the whole point of the entire thing. Revelation 16, 13, and 14 tells you exactly what's going on. These things are doing every and anything they can do. To do what? For they are spirits of devils working miracles, which go forth unto the kings of the earth and of the whole world. Right? Of the whole world, to gather them to the battle of the great day of God Almighty. And the great day of God Almighty was mentioned in the Old Testament. That great day of God Almighty, that's what they're doing. They're working miracles, which are these seemingly impossible things. Right? And if you think about it, every single time some catastrophe takes place, something impossible takes place shortly thereafter. How do you lose trillions of dollars and nobody discusses it? How does that happen? There were other things happening. They moved the financial center from the Twin Towers to Texas a week before 9/11 took place. I'm not a conspiracy theorist at all, right? I'm not. Because I don't know exactly what conspiracy means anymore. Right? But I think they knew something. I think something happened. Somebody got caught wind of something. I know that pastors were warning of that week, and people weren't listening. I do know that. I heard a couple myself. I did. Never the big guys, right? Never the well-known guys that say this stuff. It's always the smaller guys. Smaller as the world would say is smaller, right? Not popular on mainstream media. Those smaller guys. Seems like God gives them the truth. He gives them these things that people don't really listen to. In fact, God promised that because he said the world will not know when these times come. But we're supposed to know. So guess what? You know what that means? If the world does not know, it's not coming through public channels. It's going to come through the underground, so to speak. That means you have to, these people you listen to, in order to find God's word, you're going to have to labor for it. It's not going to be given to you.
right? To know those deeper things is not going to just be given to folks. It's going to be given to those who labor for the word, as it always has been. Those sincere ones are going to be equipped with the truth. Those who are not sincere, even that little bit they have is going to be taken away. A great blindness. That's coming. All right, folks, let's get some of those questions in, because I know you guys have questions about a couple of things here tonight, but at least you have some type of awareness. And yes, we do have a hurricane in Mexico, and yes, the waters are warm in the Gulf. This thing is turning in circles. I'll tell you something. There is a type of high pressure system to the western coast of Mexico, and if it gains a little more strength, it's going to push that hurricane away from Mexico and straight up. It'll ride that mountain ridge wind, those mountain ridge wind patterns on the east of Mexico, right north on the east of Mexico. It'll ride that. Right now, modeling is not going to show this yet, because they don't include that type of activity in the model. There are several things not included into weather models, into spaghetti models. They're not included. And so sometimes it takes, like some of you out there have been watching storms so much, that you can see certain systems and what they're prone to do, right? And the modeling is just not going to see it. Now, in another couple of months, some of the new AI systems that help out the weather systems, they're going to have an eye to see these patterns also, in which case every single forecast out there is going to change because of artificial intelligence, right? But right now, that's not the case. And so modeling is not going to reflect what the human eye is picking up right now. Right? All right, let's go on with the questions here. We see we've got questions, Mike. Is the water event going to be a natural event or human? No, it's going to be a natural event. See, we have pressures coming. We have something coming, right? Something that will likely upset just about everything. You know, just to give you an example of something, we've been having droughts, correct? Everybody knows about the droughts, right? Do you guys know what happens with a lack of water? You know what water does? The inside of the earth, of a portion of the earth, is molten. Did you actually know that water cools the crust down enough to where that magma doesn't breach? With a loss of water, you have the loss of cooling of that magma. So listen, the more days we go through droughts, right? The higher, or let's say the closer magma is going to be to the surface of the earth. Water is a natural lubricant, and it cools off the surface of the earth enough that magma will not remain magma up to a certain level. But when water begins to evaporate and is caught in the atmosphere, right? When water is not going through those circulations, like in the certain fault lines that we have, when water is no longer part of that formula, temperatures will increase dramatically. Magma will breach. You're talking about earthquakes no one has ever seen before, right? Forget about a strike slip. No, that's not. We're talking about the land giving way, tilting in a lot of cases, right? Remember that water cools just like watering your radiator of your car. Water circulates through your car, right? And water's a good thermal conductor of heat, and it carries heat away somewhere else, right? But without water, the heat doesn't go anywhere. It just stays there and it builds up. Well, in this case, magma will continue to melt a rock even at greater rates. Right now, we see an escalation of those rates that the magma is working, even under some of these icebergs, some of these ice sheets, right, that are starting to give way and the ice is melting underneath. The reason why is because right below those places, you have magma that's closer to the surface than ever recorded in history. Do you know that? Right now, magma is closer to the surface of the earth than it ever has been in recorded history. No one has ever seen magma this close to the surface. There are places in the earth right now, right, where entire forest regions are gone because magma has breached the surface in places where they didn't even detect a volcano.
So you have all these different tubes. It's kind of like sticking a straw down in a foam or something, right? The foam kind of obscures what's underneath. The straw would be that new channel that formed, right? And the magma can easily come up through that straw to the surface. That's what we see happening, and it's happening in a lot of places. And as this event gets worse and worse and worse, the heat is going to increase. Now, where's all that water going? Your clouds. They're going to the clouds, which means when it rains, storms are going to drop twice as much water as they have before. As magma continues to breach, we have oceans inside of the earth, right? With superheated water in them. What are the oceans that they did that survey on? Has more water in it than all the water on earth. Those will breach very soon. They're going to breach very soon. And if all that water comes out, you better believe there's going to be a flood, not some global flood. God gave the sign of the rainbow as a sign between him and us that he would not destroy the earth by water again. But we're going to have floods. Do you hear me? We're going to have floods. We're going to have some bad stuff happening to all the coastlines. But he said he will not destroy all life on earth by water again. That's what the rainbow's for. A lot of people get that mixed up. Say, well, God said he wouldn't, he's not going to send a flood. No, that's not what he said. He said he will not destroy life on the earth by water again. So the rainbow is a sign between him and us of that. But this water event, we're not talking about destroying life on earth by water again. You know what that means? That means if 80% of the world is underwater, then all life is not destroyed by water. And that covenant is not broken. You see that? But I'm confident all coastlines will be highly affected by this. I do not believe it's going to be man. A lot of people think that it was mankind was responsible for Ian. Then why is mankind so messed up because of what Ian destroyed? It's almost like Ian knew where something was that man had and it destroyed it. I mean, it obliterated some things. Outside of Florida, guys, do you know what's outside of Florida? There are underwater facilities outside of Florida. Do you guys know that? That's a part of the home of JSOC. A lot of underwater activities take place there. A lot of underwater training. That hurricane just tore up some stuff. I mean, it really did. And most of the damage of the hurricane was underneath the water, parts that you can't see. Oh, it made quite a few people upset. It absolutely and utterly destroyed it. Part of the weather hub for the actual weather weapons that we have were right there in Florida. It's not there anymore. It's not there. See, in the waters outside of Florida, all right, there are sinkholes. Very thin crust on these sinkholes, and they try not to disturb them. That means you can have an underwater facility right outside of Florida, right? That's very, pretty shallow, very near the surface. If the ground tilts or gives way or anything happens in that area, holes open up and will swallow your whole facility. This has already happened a couple of times when the water receded in Florida not more than 4 years ago. That's exactly what happened. A brand new structure too, gone. It was gone. Where did it go? Straight down. That's where it went. There are catacombs that are all throughout the East Coast. I mean, catacombs all over the place. The Army Corps of Engineers, right? They work very diligently identifying and propping up some of these places so that the East Coast does not super erode. There are things under the water nobody knows about because, if you can't see it, you're not going to ask questions about it. Nobody really likes to go into that area of conversation, but that's the way it is. And Hurricane Ian just absolutely messed up some stuff. The underwater currents were incredible. They were fast and incredible. Most people see the hurricane above the water. They're not really aware there's a hurricane below the water happening at the same time. There are strong forces happening at the same time underwater when a hurricane passes over top. And if you've got equipment, right, sitting in those areas and it's not anchored right or it's not built for that type of interaction, you're going to lose it. Period. You're going to lose it. Right? Okay. So I believe that was natural. Right? I don't, listen, I know that you have a lot of people out there that talk about weather weapons. Or weather weapons real? Yes. But you have to put those into perspective, right? You can see on Doppler the results of manipulated weather. You can see that quite clearly. Do they actually manipulate weather? You better believe it. They can enhance, right? They can sometimes change direction of. Oftentimes they have tried to use weather weapons for defense against real weather. They do that in California. There was a time in California where they purposely kept certain places dry for years. Purposely did this. Did it work? You better believe it. You better believe it worked. It was enough to upset the wind patterns to absolutely manipulate them and to keep them dry. Again, if you study the Doppler, you can see these effects on the Doppler. You can go do that at any moment you want to. Right? So they do that. But when you have storms that hit mainline facilities, those are not man-made weapons, nor was the equipment compromised. It wasn't compromised. So Ian was not something man-made because it destroyed something that we absolutely would not have destroyed, right? It destroyed it. It just killed it. Anyway, some of the supercomputers are cooled by those waters also. So remember that. These places are very important. They spend a lot of money underwater to keep these places underwater and to keep them functional, right? Why in the world would we destroy it? So we didn't do that. Now, does that mean all of them? No. No, it does not mean all. It does. In World War II, that's where it began, correct? Fogging, and they were trying to hide ships from being seen on the waters, and that's where weather manipulation came in. There were some experiments done. HAARP was invented during that time in World War II. They were utilizing HAARP to try and cause a fog around vehicles, around ocean-borne vehicles, right? HAARP also has another function. HAARP sends out infrared, or not infrared. HAARP sends out these very mixed, let's say something close to infrared, that will reflect off the sky back down to the surface. And then it goes back to HAARP. They have an interpreter for HAARP. One of the first computers was put in a HAARP station to see what the reflections were. And they developed a moving map of the surface of the earth with HAARP. Isn't that awesome? They had an actual map of the earth, right? And they had a bunch of tubes, and this is before we had, the right computer stuff, but this is with tubes. They had logic circuits with tubes they were using. And as the infrared reflected back, they would measure the differences, and the light reflected back, or some of those waves reflected back, because they're actually sending out radio waves. And by the way, radio waves can easily be interpreted to infrared very easily, because you can't see infrared. They're also intertwined with radio waves. Anyway, they would get that back and interpret that to see what the earth looked like through radio transmissions, right? That's what HAARP is doing. See, it's just not one HAARP facility. There are hundreds of HAARP facilities around the earth. Do you guys know this? Right? Raytheon did the interpreter for certain things of HAARP. They still have it right now. But that gets into a realm of things that is better discussed in a different forum, because that takes us away from our topic here. So yes, they have, weather modification, manipulation weapons, whatever you want to call them. They have earthquake-inducing armaments. Yes, they do. Right? They can easily cause one. Lightning. They can actually induce lightning wherever they want. That they can do. And through cellular phone triangulation of signals to get your phone calls and to send them, they can absolutely concentrate microwaves at any spot on the surface of the earth. Wherever you receive a cell phone signal, they can transmit a microwave to the surface of the earth. You guys know this. They can easily triangulate to knock anybody out in the world they want knocked out. Hope you know that. Which should tell you something. It should really tell you something. Because if there was really a madman, right, doing anything he wanted to do, why didn't they take him out already? And just think about that. Wherever you can use a cell phone, that area is a target area. They can reach out and touch anybody. So why have they done this? Why haven't they done this? Sometimes you have to look at something with different eyes, right? Very different eyes. Somebody says bingo 1983 meeting. Yes. Yep. Okay, folks. Where's that other question, Robin? I think you had another one for me, and somebody had one. Somebody said radiation preparedness is seen all over New York and New Jersey. That will actually be nationwide. I'd say within 30 days, it should be nationwide. Now they have the factories for radiation mitigation medication. They have the factories working overtime because they've almost emptied out or filled up. They've certainly filled up, and they're back ordered in that medication for radiation fallout. Radiation makes you sick and nauseous. It burns your skin, can cause you itches, rashes that are just terrible. It's likened to shingles, some people say. It can make you lose I lost all the hair on my body at one point through radiation exposure. I wasn't exposed to the point where I had blisters all over the place, but I did lose all my hair, and I was nauseated, and I lost my taste. I couldn't smell anything for a while. It was kind of like, I guess you could say, like COVID, but everything grew back and everything. But it does leave you with a metallic taste in your mouth for some years. So, those effects with radiation are not good. You can smell radiation too. You can. Your everything smells different. Everything smells different. And you're going to be hypersensitive to radiation from that point out, right? Which means they've had accidents with radiation already. And some people know exactly what that is. Radiation is cumulative. And so they have developed newer type medications to mitigate the radiation buildup in the body. They absolutely know, right, how to draw or to attract radiation, to have it flow kind of like in a circuit. Because once you become irradiated, you're like a battery that has no wire hooked up to it. So the chemical process takes its place. Okay, folks, let's see. What do we have here? Brother Mike, recommendations on prayer for radiation exposure. You know what? Listen, you guys who believe in Christ, listen to me carefully. Listen to me carefully. I'm telling you now, the Lord will do what He'll do what no one even had a mind to think of. Okay? Don't ever, I can't explain this enough. Don't fear the conditions you may find yourself in. Don't do that. But understand this. If you end up in the middle of an exposure zone, right? Trust in the Lord's way. See, that's your moment. Right now, let me pause real quick. I know I'm going over time, but I can't help myself. Let me pause real quick. How many of you right now, right? You suffer with these faith issues sometimes, right? Because you really don't know what the end result of your kids is going to be, and what this is going to be, and that's going to be, right? And you want something where you can really work on your faith. You say, Lord, I need more faith. I need to believe in you, because I know I'm not quite believing in you like I could. So there's some issue here, and I want help with that. Increase my faith, right? Well, let me tell you something. If we went through some sort of a nuclear exchange, do you not understand that would be a perfect opportunity for you to awaken those parts of faith within you that may be dormant? Listen, your faith is not awakened in peacetime. Your faith is not going to be awakened, nor is it going to be fully utilized in a time where you don't need it. Your faith is on demand. That means when you find yourself in a situation, right? Because it happens all the time this way. And let me describe to you guys what happens so you have some confidence in this. What happens is a person finds themselves in one of these situations that nobody ever thought about, nobody ever wrote about, nobody ever predicted, nobody ever knew could be, could happen that way. And that believing Christian has to face the prospect of death. Happens every time. And when they face that prospect of death, you know what the average Christian begins to say? They don't say, "Spare me, Lord." You know what they do? They say, okay, well, it's going to take me out, Lord. I'm going to stand up and I'm going to do everything for you right now in this moment. That's what they do in a boldness. Because they start thinking, they say, well, if I'm going to die, I'm going to go all out for Christ. I'm not going to stand here in fear. I'm not going to cower away. I'm going to stand up and perform what I didn't perform before. And then a Christian will stand up and say, "Lord, use me for your cause." Forget everything else. They'll stand up in the middle of a crisis and declare Jesus is Lord and say, "Use me," and will not move until they are instructed. At that point, your faith is increased. Right? At that point, you cannot do that unless you're faced with a real severe situation. Your faith is not going to wake up like that unless you're faced with something that will actually cause you to make a decision to stand up no matter what. See, all of us right now, if we said, "I'm going to stand no matter what," we can't even make that statement until we're tried. You have to be tried before you make that statement, because the truth is, you don't know what you're going to do. You don't know how you're going to feel. You don't know how you're going to respond. But when a trouble comes, when that situation comes, we don't like it coming. But I'm telling you right now, in the middle of that situation, facing death, when you face that prospect of death, your heart changes. You start looking at everybody else in that moment. You're going to forget about yourself. You will forget about yourself, and something else will wake up within you. And in that moment, you'll stand firm. You'll say, "Oh no, I'm going to stand for you, Lord, right now. And this is the way it is." That's exactly what you'll say. That does not happen in peacetime. You know what it says in the Bible? That the Lord is the author and finisher of your faith. And it says the work he began in you, he'll finish. He will do that. So he's responsible over your life. He will determine if and when that moment comes. But he's going to finish. He's the finisher of your faith. He's going to complete that work he began in you. He will do that, not us. He will. So I'll say it again right now. We can't do that on our own. We'll be highly ineffective. How many of us have said, "Yes, I'm going to have faith given a certain situation," but you're blindsided by something you just didn't think was going to come, right? And it made you stumble off course a little bit because you didn't see it coming that way. God knows that when we're tried in truth, that's when we declare what we are. That's why one of the titles in this week's topics was, you can't walk with the title the world gave you. You can't do that, because that's not who you are. God knows who you are, and he knows when he's going to wake that part of you up. He already knows. So when people are sitting there telling you you're this, you're that, you're this, that, and the other, hear it, right? So that you may try to refine yourself. But also say, "Jimmy cracked corn. I don't live my life according to how others have labeled me. Live your life according to faith, according to the word of God, as you understand it and as it comes to you, right? Try your best not to be a hypocrite. Don't claim something you're not. Just simply stand up in truth when that moment comes. Listen to me, everybody. You know how a lot of times we say statements like, "Oh, yes, I'm going to be ready when so-and-so happens. Oh, yes, I'm going to prepare right now." Well, the truth is this: you can prepare for anything, right? You can prepare for anything. There's only one time when you'll understand and know if you were ever ready for that something is when it happens. You can prepare for things. You can do that. You can take all precautions. You could think it all the way through, do whatever. But that term being ready for something, you'll never know that until that time comes. You'll never know that. Please remember that. You can prepare. Only God knows if you're ready. And when that situation comes, right? He will show you how ready you truly were. Sure, you remember that. Sometimes when you've seen quite a few things, right? You don't forget these small moments in having wisdom and understanding, and they really make a difference. We can prepare for a lot, but only God knows what we're ready for. He knows. All right, remember that. Somebody says, Mike, what's the status of your dream about the visitors flying the belt buckle looking crap? Well, I'll tell you something, guys. Listen, I haven't talked about this subject in a long time. I'm going to do that with the Book of Enoch. There's some things you need to know in the Book of Enoch. There's some things you need to know. There are also some things with the Book of Enoch you need to know here on Earth, right? For example, I know they're not covering it because this war in the Ukraine is chewing up all the media, and the prosecution of President Trump is chewing up the other half, and President Biden in his I guess the world's perceived frailty of him is taking up the rest of that. So they don't cover anything else too much. But I'll tell you something. Sometimes I have no choice but to stay the course in things that I have convictions about, right? No choice. Now, some things I say because the data, right, indicates that. Some things I say because the Lord has given it to me. Right, that happens. And of course, some things I say because of once you watch things for a long time, you tend to see where things are going. I believe that's part of the God-given wisdom that we have, that all of us have. But when it comes to subjects about those things we haven't seen, we don't have an experience with, things must happen now. They are happening in parts of the world now. There are some truths that are out there. Here's the truth. If you really knew the truth about what people are saying are UAPs, UFOs, you would have no interest in the subject another second. You'd probably run away from the subject and leave it alone if you knew the truth about it, right? So if you ever discover anybody who's honestly been close to a recovery team, right? They use a word called interfacing. Now, it may seem strange. It may seem like one of the new terms. It may seem like something they use in computers only. No, it's a very real term. It's such a real term that the Air Force committed laws of individuals for counter intel against people to set up, hoaxes to draw people's attention away from the real thing. Because I'm telling you right now, something is not coming here. Something has been here. So it's been here for a long time, right? It's been here. Now, when it comes to the subject of things coming from other planets, this is God's creation. What if you trained Michael and Raphael and Gabriel in another solar system somewhere, right? Well, that means they're not from here. That's what it means. But that's going to become a very serious subject. Very serious one. But they still have no power over you, because if they did, you wouldn't be here. You would have been destroyed. They've tried to befriend you. They've tried to come to you in visions and dreams. They've tried to beguile you. They've tried to confuse you. They have marked half of you, and they still did not succeed. Somebody says reptilians type. I don't believe in all that different type. Let me tell you something. Angels are spirit. When an angel falls from his appointed place, when he leaves his first estate, do you not know he's leaving the place where he existed, and he takes up a new type of shell? That's what he does. I've seen a couple things, not a whole lot, but a couple things, to the point where I will not look on the outward appearance of something and ever be fooled again. Right? I'll never do it. It's kind of like this dinosaur subject, and how people They just believe hook, line, and sinker what these professors have written in books, and professors pridefully guard their knowledge. But they've all made a critical error. They didn't tell you guys that with your own eyes, you'll see all that stuff come back. Because it too is part of these UFO disclosure stuff. And we're not talking about time travel and portals and all that kind of stuff. That's not what we're talking about. Species and animals that have long been extinct have been coming back for the last 10 years with a vengeance. 2 ancient crocodiles that swam in the oceans are back. You ever seen a 50-foot long alligator? That seems unreal, right? It's not going to seem unreal when you hear reports of the Navy having issues with them. 6 flippered long things in the ocean, about 72 feet long. That's not a whale because it has 0 things on its back. And it swims in the ocean like a centipede. You didn't see that documented, did you? What about the giant beavers? You know, the ones that hang out in the Midwest and on the West Coast? You didn't hear about those either. They want nothing to do with water, and they're all over the place. And those things are humongous, and they have no natural predators. What about the simple dire wolf? That's been coming back in numbers in Canada, right? They've been coming back. You're talking about a wolf that stands about 4.5 feet to 5 feet tall on all fours. We're not talking about some puny wolf that could be mistaken to be a dire wolf. That's not what we're talking about. No, like the ones that were actually held as specimens in the U.S. Oh, by the way, the ones they caught in the U.S. Those are smart animals. Yeah, they're all coming back. Do they know how they're coming back? No, they don't. Because how in the world can some extinct species come back? People believed in science. You know what the problem is? People believed, hook, line, and sinker, that they were being told the truth with all these textbooks. Right? That's what they thought. They didn't know about isolated places in the world. They didn't know about that. Nobody was doing trade like they were doing now, where they just exchange eggs all over the place. What about some of the people who have bought these dogs and they thought they were chow chows until they stand up to be 5 feet tall? A 5-foot tall dog? Are you kidding me? People have them. Oh, yeah, they have them. And as soon as they take them to the vet, they're confiscated. How about that? But if you bought a dog and you thought it was a little bitty chow chow and it was a puppy, and then it starts growing up and it goes past that of a Great Dane and keeps going, how about that one? Who wants a 300-pound dog? I don't want a 400-pound dog. Those things get huge. Where'd they come from? What is that? There's no classification of that, is there? What about the serpents that have been seen in Florida? Certainly in Hurricane Ian. They didn't show you the film of that one, did they? White bellies, greenish, bluish top, long, thick, about the size of I'd say about, you take a telephone pole, right? You put 3 of those together. That's how thick this thing was. What is that? Well, what in the world is that? And it was in the shallows. In the shallows. You remember the manatees? I tried to tell you guys, when the manatees were healthy, the dodo Mike from around the world from the bushes told you guys something before anything ever got started. Do you guys remember what I told you about the manatees? I know people were chuckling and everything else. I said, listen, in Florida they have a problem. There's serpents eating up the manatees, whole, eating the whole thing. And I said, they're going to have to come up with something to cover this. Well, what was it, about 4 months, 5 months later? 6 months later, what happened? Oh, well, the manatees are running out of food. Really? Really? I say stuff ahead of things for a reason. So hopefully some people will not look for the obvious routes they have laid out for you. So you can actually see, so that you're not surprised. Listen, because if you were to ever teach your children and say, son, daughter, I know the world has taught you certain things don't exist. And if you started to describe something for them just to say, if you see this, don't be frightened, you have helped that child. Because when they grow up, they're going to start seeing things nobody is ever talking about. People are going to be terrified at that time. We have all read the Bible of how society will be. But if you have taught them to walk and there's no fear and that somehow God will have his people informed, they're going to have more confidence in the living God through you. Just like God gives us warning of everything he does before he does it. Why shouldn't we do those that we care about, do them the same? Give them those truthful things, not the popular way that men lives. Because haven't you noticed that science is changing every single month? Every single month they're taking things that they have just stuck with for hundreds of years, saying, oh no, this is the way it is in science. They're throwing it out the window. No apology, no anything else. They're throwing it out the window and they're writing in the new stuff. There's no accountability for that. But you better not say something they have not said, or you're going to be persecuted by the world, because your speech is not sanctioned by these systems of the world. If they don't tell you how to categorize something, you better not speak it, or you will face persecution by them. See, Jesus told us about these kingdoms in this world, who was behind them, and what persecutions were all about. And they're doing it every single day, and we ignore it. We know the spiritual realm because of the Bible, right? But there are so many people who want to ignore the spiritual realm, rationalize the Word of God, so they can live in their comfortable life in their own minds, not even knowing that you guys are spirits. Somebody challenged me to watch one of these ghost shows, so I did. I sat there and watched it, and this guy said, let me tell you what this guy said. Oh, a spirit talked. And I just thought to myself, how dumb is that? We're spirits in the earth, right? You're a spirit. I'm a spirit. The guy above you is a spirit. We just are inside of a body and can do physical things in this realm, but we're spirits. And they get excited because a spirit said something on a voice recorder that was all jumbled up and it sounded mechanical. That's precisely how the fallen ones sound, like mechanical voices. And if you've ever been dreaming and you heard some metallic voice, you've also had further communications and influences and problems in your life. You've also had mental issues in your life. You've also had emotional turmoil in your life. And if you're female, you've also had woman problems in your life. The world ignores this stuff. You're not supposed to. You're supposed to know exactly what you're dealing with. But whose report are you going to believe? The world's? No. They're deceiving themselves. What do you think of the Bible? It says men's hearts failing them for fear for looking after those things which are coming upon the earth. I'll tell you what, if you're looking after those things which are coming upon the earth, then guess what? You have found out some things that you don't want to face. So you keep being willfully ignorant of the truth. You ignore it, you push it down to somebody else's generation, not knowing that you're going to have to deal with it when it comes. You start thinking about the reality of it. So much so that you say, oh, my Lord, I'm going to really have to deal with this. And poof, your heart stops. You fall over dead. No time for repentance. So they were basically dying in denial. How about that? There's no good place for a person like that, is there? They were having heart attacks because they knew about things, but they didn't want anybody speaking about it because they were scared. That's those people, and they say, oh, that's a bunch of nonsense. You know why? They don't want to deal with that subject because it's outside of their circle of control. Those same individuals do not believe in angels. They can pray with you all day, and I'm telling you, their minds are scoffing just about everything. They try to rationalize things. They believe that the Bible is just some metaphorical book, something that people need to continue to live their lives because they have to believe in something. That's why you have to be careful of whose report you believe, because some of those people are preaching, and they do not believe in Yahshua HaMashiach. And they are miserable inside. The Bible to them is a business, a corporation. You're their pocketbook. That's what you are. They're smiling because you pay them everything they need. But they have become callous and heartless, and they will not escape. And that's why Jesus said, those people come up to him, did we heal in your name? Yep. Did we preach in your name? Yep. Did we do all this stuff in your name? Yep. And then Jesus will say, depart from me, you worker of iniquity. I never knew you. See how that works? Don't fall for it, because you will certainly see it. You will see it with your own eyes, but at least you had the warning. And if you had the warning, you said, wait a minute. Somebody that believed in Christ, they said this. They mentioned this. And if they mentioned this, those same individuals also said to have no fear. Christ is giving you dominion over all these things through his name. See, in that moment, you'll say, Lord, let me put down my foolishness and let me surrender. That never hurts. I see it, Lord, and I choose you. That's what you'll say. You're not going to care what's walking beside you. Right now, if some sort of a worldly ET came to my front door, right, you would have to wait because I'm talking. I would like to get irritated due to that bold interruption. I'm telling you the truth. Because I was sitting somewhere one time. Somebody said, look at those lights up there. They were blinking and everything. So I kind of glanced up and I said, look, I got to do some stuff. And they couldn't believe I walked away seeing those lights. That stuff doesn't captivate me. To be honest with you, it gets on my nerves. Because see what that is seductive. God's angels don't work that way. They're not going to flash their wing at you and say, ooh, look at my wing there, and then disappear. Have you just totally go off course looking for a bunch of angel wings. That's not the way God's messengers work. They come and say, I've come in the name of the Lord. They are about the Father's business. They tell you what they need to tell you, and they're gone. They're not staying around having lunch, peeking around corners, showing up in your dreams, trying to seduce you to go somewhere else, to give up your sovereignty to them. These things in the sky, they try to peek into your life. You know why they peek at you? You know why they show up and don't get too close at first? Because if you ever rebuke them, they've got to yield. That's why. One rebuke and it's dead. One rebuke, that's the end of that. Because you have dominion over them. God gave you dominion over the earth. He did not give them dominion over the earth. He assigned them a position. They fell from that position. Therefore, they have no position. And if you catch them doing something they're not supposed to be doing, you have a right to bind them. God will judge them, but you can bind them from their deeds at that moment. They don't want you to see them. All of you who believe in Christ, they don't want you to see them. Because you're the wrong person. They need somebody who does not quite believe in Christ, who is empty in their belief, so they can fill them up with some false belief. Have them thinking if they go to Gaia, the earth, right, stomp 3 times and drop an apple seed, it'll rejuvenate a forest. That's what they want. Because if they lose the earth, they have nowhere else to run. They want the earth to stay around for as long as they can. Why do you think that every message they give is this? Save the trees, save the environment. Why? Because that's all they have. They have no placement in the heavens. They have no placement in the spiritual realm. If they lose this earth, they are kaput. They're doomed. They know exactly where they're going. And every demon is frightened of hell. Every single last one. So they want humanity to save the earth at all costs. But they're so wicked. Even in their trying to save the earth, they're destroying it. They can't even see it. They're trying to, listen to me. You cut out fossil fuels, but you increase pharmaceuticals? Not knowing that the earth exists for humanity. So let me tell you what they're doing so that you understand this perfectly. They're trying to save the earth, but they don't care about human life. Do you hear me? They don't care if you drop dead every single day. They want the earth saved over human life. Here's what they don't understand. There is no earth without humanity. The earth exists for our sakes. If we're gone, there's no purpose for the earth, and it shall not exist. That's how dumb that is. Now, I have foot and mouth disease, so I'm going to say something that normally gets me in trouble. That's why no one should feed an animal above their starving neighbor. Humanity comes first. That's the apple of God's eye. What spirit could seduce humanity to reject his neighbor and accept a dog? What spirit is that? That's not our Father at all. And that's already been in the earth for a long time. That means we still have work to do. But I'll tell you this. If you trust in the Messiah, truly trust in the Messiah, all these things that are coming, you're going to find that they are part of your deliverance. That moment of truth must come. It must come. And when it comes, you're not going to be left by yourself. The host of heaven will be there with you. Jesus will always be with you in your troubles. Do you know that? Always. That will be your proving ground. That's when you will choose what you'll actually do. Right now, you learn, you attempt, you try, you get up and do it again. A time will come, a time of the choice. It will come. And I encourage you, when that moment comes, see the truth of it. See it for what it really is. When you face that despair, in that moment, realize what life truly is. And choose your real family, the Messiah, and all the begotten. That's your real family. But I know that if you belong to Christ, in that moment, you'll stand up when everything is wrong and say, Lord, I'll serve you anyway. That's when it happens. When you're in those rough conditions and you stand up and say, Lord, I know things have gone wrong and I was looking for the good thing to happen, but it got worse. I'll serve you anyway. That's when the curse is broken. That's when nothing else can hold on to you. Do you know that? Before I go, I want to tell you something. Your Father's been asking all of you a question. You know what it is? Throughout all the mishaps of your life, all the trials and the tribulations, even those that may potentially come up on your life, he's asking you something. Will you serve me? See, when your situation was all messed up, he did ask you that. Will you serve me? Some of you said at first, well, the conditions are too rough. I can't serve you. I got to have, when the conditions go away, I'll serve you, Lord, all day, but just make it go away. So you essentially said, no, I can't serve you. This problem has to go away first, then I'll serve you. Some of you said, I don't have enough. When I have enough, then I'll serve you. See, that was our answer prior to this day. That's why it keeps coming back, because the Lord will never give up on you. When he continues to ask, will you serve me in your troubles? What will be your answer? Will you serve me when everything goes wrong? What will be your answer? Will you serve me when there is no light? What will be your answer? Will you serve me when everyone else walks away? What's going to be your answer? I don't know about you, but my answer is going to be yes. So when everything goes wrong, I'll stand up and say, yes, Lord, I'll serve you. When I have nothing to work with, and that has happened more often than one would think, I'll stand up and say, yes, Lord, I'll serve you. When this body is broken and it seems like there's no hope, I'll stand up and say, yes, Lord, I'll serve you. And I encourage you to see that. See, because if you don't see that, you won't see the question. You didn't see the question the first time. But if you can see it, you'll answer it in kind. You'll answer it truthfully. You'll be equipped to give an answer. And everything is shaping up for those questions to really come. Because when you say yes, that's when darkness is broken. When you say yes, the generational curse will never come back. When you say yes, Satan's grip is seared off of you. When you say yes, those things of darkness have to let go of your mind. When you say yes, you take your position among the joint heirs of Christ. When you say yes and continue to say yes, your pathway is secured to victory. All these things in life are asking you. That's your Father in heaven asking you. I encourage you guys to give an honest answer. Folks, God bless and keep all of you always. We couldn't get everything out tonight, but we got some of it out. Hopefully everybody has a better understanding about propaganda. But most importantly, if you guys consider, the Lord is asking that question. Only you can give an answer. But I hope and pray and I encourage you to give an answer, never to run away. God bless and keep all of you. I'll see you guys next time, right here at COT.